So, today's reading will be from Bernard Malmud's The Fixer. Bernard Malmud, The Fixer, takes place in Russia in 1911. Repairman called Yakov Bok is accused of ritual child murder. And just to put it in context, today the Russian church is still promoting lots of anti-Semitism and hate based on complete mystical nonsense where they convince people to hate others without even knowing anything about their traditions. And this happens also throughout the Muslim world today, where there's a lot of hate speech against Jews. So here is a quote. Irrational streams of blood are staining earth. Yeats. O young you of Lincoln, slain also with cursed Jews, as it is notable, for it is but a little while ago. Pray for us, we sinful folk, unstable, chosen. So, chapter 1, part 1. From the small crossed window of his room, above the stable in the brickyard, Yakov Bok saw people in their long overcoats running somewhere early that morning, everybody in the same direction. Veizmir, or Veizmir as we say it, he thought uneasily. Something bad has happened. The Russians coming from streets around the cemetery were hurrying, singly or in groups, in the spring snow, in the direction of the caves in the Raven. Some running in the middle of the slushy cobblestone streets. Yakov hastily hid the small tin can in which he saved silver rubles, then rushed down to the yard to find out what the excitement was about. He asked Poshko, the foreman, loitering near the smoky brick kilns, but Poshko spat and said nothing. Outside the yard, a black-shawled, bony-faced peasant woman, thickly dressed, told him the dead body of a child had been found nearby. Where? Yakov asked. How old a child? But she said she didn't know and hurried away. The next day, the Kievlyanin reported that in a damp cave in a Raven not more than a verst and a half from the brickworks, the body of a murdered Russian boy, Zenya Golov, 12 years old, had been found by two older boys, both 15, Zazimir Silivanov and Ivan Shastinsky. Zenya, dead more than a week, was covered with stab wounds, his body blood white. After the funeral in the cemetery close by the brick factory, Richter, one of the drivers, brought in a handful of leaflets accusing the Jews of the murder. They had been printed, Yakov saw when he examined one, by the Black Hundreds organizations. The emblem, the imperial double-headed eagle, was imprinted on the cover, and under it, Save Russia from the Jews. In his room that night, Yakov, in fascination, read that the boy had been bled to death for religious purposes so the Jews could collect his blood and deliver it to the synagogue for making of Passover matzahs. Though this was ridiculous, he was frightened. He got up, sat down, and got up again. He went to the window, then returned hastily and continued to read the newspaper. He was worried because the brick factory where he worked was in the Lukyanovsky district, one in which Jews were forbidden to live. He had been living there for months under an assumed name and without a residence certificate, and he was frightened of the pogrom threatened in the newspaper. His own father had been killed in an incident not more than a year after Yakov's birth. Something less than a pogrom, and less than useless. 2 drunken soldiers shot the first 3 Jews in their path. His father had been the second. But then the son had lived through a pogrom when he was a schoolboy, a 3-day Cossack raid. On the third morning, when the houses were still smoldering and he was led with half a dozen other children out of a cellar where they had been hiding, he saw a black-bearded Jew with a white sausage stuffed into his mouth, lying in the road on a pile of bloody feathers, a peasant's pig devouring his arm. Chapter 2. 5 months ago, on a mild Friday in early November, before the first snow had snowed on the shtetl, Yaakov's father-in-law, a skinny, worried man in clothes about to fall apart, who looked as though he had been assembled out of sticks and whipped air, drove up with his skeletal horse and rickety wagon. They sat in the thin, cold house, gone to seed 2 months after Razel, the faithless wife, had fled, and drank a last glass of tea together. Shmuel, long since 60, with tousled gray beard, rheumy eyes, and deeply creased forehead, dug into his kaftan pocket for a yellow sugar lump and offered it to Yaakov, who shook his head.